The power scaling in the Buu Saga is a mess. I'm just going to come out and say it, this was the hardest ranking I've ever had to put together, requiring days of cross-referencing chapters and back and forth debates with myself to reach the list I have now. Some of you won't like where I put these characters, I don't like where I put some of them either, but if I'm going to give an objective ranking, I have to ignore what I want and focus on what the text actually shows us. This is a manga-only ranking of every character in the Buu Saga, where I take guidebooks and statements as secondary sources. I've broken the characters into tiers S through F, and if a character falls below F tier, they don't get talked about. I'll show the ones that didn't make the cut now, and aside from Babidi, they're mostly in order. As proof of the Buu Saga being a power scaling hellhole, you should take note of the fact that androids 17 and 18 didn't even qualify for a mention on this ranking. That's how bad it's gotten. Starting our F tier, we have Piccolo at 17th place. A character who has consistently been in the top 10 all throughout the series is now relegated to the 17th spot on the ranking. The problem is that Piccolo just doesn't do much in this arc. He's had 7 years to train since the Cell Saga, and given his gains in the previous arcs and later on in Super, you'd think he'd be a powerhouse here, but he's kinda just not. Some point to him being the dominant factor in Piccolo as proof that he at least surpasses Goten and Trunks, and while I really want to go down that route, the boys are shown to go back into base upon defusing. Given that Buu wanted Gotenks to turn Super Saiyan 3 before absorbing him, it is basically spelled out for us that a character must be transformed for that level of power to be added on to Buu's strength. Even before fusion was put on the table, and before Goten and Trunks trained in the time chamber, Piccolo thought they were their last hopes against Buu without Vegeta, Gohan, or Goku. He didn't include himself in that sentiment, and he was also completely shocked later on by their power. The only thing he did in this arc was chop Babidi in half, and given Babidi's own belief that he could take Shin in a fight, this might be enough to grant him a higher rating, but at least in the manga, Babidi didn't get the chance to work his magic or fight back against Piccolo before he got sliced. Unfortunately, Piccolo is just not that impressive in the Buu Saga, dropping him to the bottom of F tier. Speaking of characters that deserve more growth, only 3% of you watching this video are subscribed. If you've seen the previous videos in this series and want to see my future rankings, or just want to stay up to date with my newest videos, consider clicking that subscribe button. As of releasing this video, I'm approaching 100 subscribers, and it would be really cool if you could help me pass that goal. But yeah, no, that's it. On to the next ranking. At 16th place, we have Shin. The current top god of the setting is the 16th strongest character in the Buu Saga. Most people use Piccolo's deference to Shin in the tournament to put him above Piccolo, and while that is a nice piece of supplementary evidence, that is not the whole reason. There's also that bit about Shin being on level with Cell Games Goku from El Manga Legendario, but as this video points out, that source is questionable at best. Shin is above Piccolo for his performance against Buu. This is his only fight in the entire series, and while he does not even come close to challenging Buu, Shin can momentarily halt him and somewhat push him back while surviving multiple hits from him. Buu just stomped Dabura and was doing heavy damage to Gohan. Babidi was telling Buu to kill them, and it wouldn't make sense for Buu to suddenly pull his punches when attacking Shin. Couple that with Shin's ability to restrain Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, who while weaker than his rage-amped Cell Saga peak, still stands as a significant power at this point. While Shin was still floored by even the Super Saiyan 1's power, his ability to survive the same attacks that Dabura and Gohan were taking, and his ability to possibly affect beings up to the Super Saiyan 2 tier power with his magic, lock Shin in at 16th place in the ranking. Goten and Trunks occupy our 15th and 14th spots. Their powers are identical after the time chamber training, though Trunks has a year on Goten, meaning that he possibly holds an edge in intelligence and experience, no matter how small that edge might be. Even before the tournament, Goten's power completely shocked Gohan, who began worrying about being surpassed by his 7-year-old brother. Something similar happens with Trunks, who spars with his father and actually lands a strike before getting laid out. Obviously, Vegeta was holding back here, but just like Gohan with Goten, he was very impressed with Trunks' power. We then have a similar scene with Piccolo being impressed by the boys. Speaking of Piccolo, I want to remind you that Piccolo believed Trunks and Goten were Earth's last hope, not himself, not the androids or the humans. He believed Trunks and Goten had the best chance against Buu when fusion wasn't even on the table. This was all before they trained in the time chamber for 15 days. After their training, their gains are actually pretty significant, to the point that Piccolo thinks base Gotenks might actually stand a chance against Super Buu when a prior Super Saiyan Gotenks would not. While this is quickly proven to not be true, this points to their baseline levels of power increasing enough that a Metamorph fusion of them would see a massive boost. While it's likely that they fall behind the main cast's Super Saiyan forms in power, the gap is not significant enough that they shouldn't also sit above Piccolo in terms of power, granting them their spots on the ranking and their status as the top of F tier, or a little more controversially, the bottom of E tier. Dabura is our first true E tier of the ranking and the 13th strongest character of this arc, which is really shocking since he is directly compared to Cell, the previous number 2 of the first, from the previous arc. There's some debate on whether Dabura is compared to Perfect Cell or Super Perfect Cell. and all I have to say on that is that it doesn't make much sense to compare Dabura to a level that isn't Cell at his maximum. Goku, Vegeta, and Gohan were aware of Cell's full power, and no one was against the idea of Dabura being on level with Cell, or bothered clarifying that he was actually equal to Cell before his Zenkai, not after. If anything, Dabura's magic caused him to exceed Goku's expectations. Honestly though, whether or not Dabura is on level with perfect or super perfect Cell doesn't really affect his ranking or tiering, so believe whatever you want, I don't care. Dabura's only fights were against a rusty Super Saiyan 1 Gohan. Yes, he was Super Saiyan 1. Toriyama was actually pretty good about including lightning on the characters that were in Super Saiyan 2 throughout the Buu Saga. And a big part of Gohan's fight against Dabura and later Buu was that he wasn't angry enough to use his full power or Super Saiyan 2. While he held the upper hand for most of the fight, Dabura later showed that he was nothing against Buu, putting up an equal if not worse performance compared to Gohan's. Dabura might also just be a Super Saiyan Vegeta victim, since Goku did not doubt Vegeta's ability to take Dabura out, despite him not knowing if Vegeta achieved Super Saiyan 2 yet. All of this points to Dabura being in this awkward spot of either stomping or getting stomped by everyone on this list, aside from Goten and Trunks. Kibito Kai is the 12th strongest character of the Buu Saga and the bottom of D tier. And before you click off the video or tell me how much of a stupid chud I am, hear me out. We know that Portara Fusion is at the very least on level with Metamoran Fusion. Old Kai holds it in higher regard, but that's more in part to it lasting longer and it not requiring the fighters to be completely equal in power. Kibito Kai is the fusion of Kibito and Shin, an F tier character on this list. For the sake of the argument, let's say that Shin isn't even F tier. Him surviving multiple hits from Buu was a fluke, and he's actually only a bit stronger than Frieza. Kibito's scaling isn't super clear in the manga, but Daizenshu claims that a fight between Gohan and Kibito would be a difficult one for base Gohan, implying that Kibito may be on his level. Goten and Trunks are also somewhat relative to Gohan's base, though weaker to an unknown degree. Now, at this point, this is going to be a mini Gotenks section as it's relevant for Kibito Kai's own scaling. Gotenks' post-time chamber base power is held in high regard by Piccolo, who thinks it might stand a chance against Super Buu when his earlier Super Saiyan power would not. Keep in mind that his pre-time chamber Super Saiyan power was thought to be capable of taking on innocent Buu by both Piccolo and Goku. We also have Daizenshu claiming that Gotenks surpassed Vegeta and the others after his training in the time chamber. Gotenks' Super Saiyan was already supposed to be on level with Fat Buu before the time chamber, so the implication here leans more towards Gotenks in base managing to surpass Vegeta. Now, I'm not going to claim that base Gotenks is as strong as his Super Saiyan form from before the time chamber, since that leads to the very weird and sad reality where his base might be able to fight Super Saiyan 3 Goku. However, we have too much pointing to the idea that his base is at least relevant to the Super Saiyan 2 plus levels of power to ignore it. If Gotenks' base is even a quarter of his previous Super Saiyan 1 power, then he's at the very least around Vegeta's Super Saiyan 2 level of power. All of this is important because the sum of Kibito Kai's components are greater than the sum of Goten and Trunks' base forms, meaning that Kibito Kai must also be at least as strong as base Gotenks. Still, Kibito Kai never actually fights, and is considered a liability against Buu since he would just end up as a victim or fodder for absorption. That, along with his ranking being entirely speculation, is why I'm not placing him higher than the guy above him, who did actually stay, fight against, and survive Buu for an extended period of time. Vegeta occupies the 11th spot on the ranking, which is just really sad compared to where he was at in all the previous lists. Despite his ranking, Vegeta's actually really impressive. He sees a character like Dabura as trash and someone that he can take out quickly. Keep in mind that Goku and the audience didn't know if he could go Super Saiyan 2 yet, and Goku still believed that he could kill Dabura without too much of a problem in just Super Saiyan 1. Upon gaining his Majin Amp, he clearly surpasses Gohan's previous peak, standing as an equal with Goku's own Super Saiyan 2. He also noticeably did better against Buu than Dabura or Gohan, actually hurting Buu a tiny bit, as he puts it. Though Buu's durability is weird, so I wouldn't put that much stock into this. After his death and subsequent return, Vegeta seemingly seen no drop in power and goes on to fight Kid Buu for over a minute to buy time for Goku. I think the term fight may be giving him too much credit for what Kid Buu did to him, but he managed to hold Kid Buu's attention for an extended period of time and not die, which is pretty good considering his earlier performance against Fat Buu, as well as Gohan's and Dabura's. Given the fact that he was dead here, it's possible that his dead body was actually helping his stamina and durability to some degree, which could explain why he lasted for so long against Kid Buu. If him being dead makes that much of a difference, then this ranking is for that exact version of him. Vegeta's ability to survive against Kid Buu and willingness to fight when Kibito Kai wouldn't justify his ranking, but unfortunately can't place him any higher. Kicking off C tier and rounding out our top 10, we have Evil Buu, the embodiment of Innocent Buu's wrath given form. Evil Buu took the majority of Innocent Buu's power in their split, to the point that he made a complete joke out of Good Buu in their brief scuffle, managing to dodge all of Buu's hits, easily landing his own and damaging Good Buu, and then simply blowing his opponent's candy beam back towards him to end the fight. Honestly, Evil Buu treated Good Buu worse than Vegeta, Dabura, and Gohan were treated by Innocent Buu, really pointing to the fact that Evil Buu got a vast majority of the power in the split, granting him entry into C tier when he might have otherwise been relegated to D tier. Another character that is entirely based on speculation, we have the Grand Supreme Kai at 9th place. While we do see him fight in the Dragon Ball Super manga, he is either in his prime against a young Moro, or manifesting through Good Buu and pulling off some insane shit that shouldn't translate to the weakened version of him that couldn't beat Buff Buu. I say weakened because if you didn't know, he sacrificed a large amount of his power to seal Moro away prior to his eventual fight against Buu. It's likely that his full power would have obliterated Buu, given what we saw him do in Super, but we're only going to be taking the version of the Grand Supreme Kai who got absorbed by Buu into account. Quite frankly, we don't know much about this guy, except that he survived a beating from Buff Buu and was able to suppress his own power, plus the South Supreme Kai's power, plus Kid Buu's power, down to a level that is even weaker than Super Saiyan 3 Goku's power, while being inside Buu and rendered unconscious. This on its own is pretty impressive and implies a level of power that should be able to at least tangle with the C tiers of the saga, to the extent that I believe even his weakened state sits above Evil Buu in power. Given all that I just said about Evil Buu's superiority over Good Buu, it might surprise you to see him at 8th place. While it is true that Buu lost a majority of his power in the split, that was not the last that we ever saw of Mr. Buu. He was later spat up by Kid Buu in the final battle and proceeded to have a long, drawn-out fight with the other Buu. He managed to land hits on his opponent, deal some damage, and survive for much longer than he did against Evil Buu. This leaves two possibilities. Either Evil Buu was stronger than Kid Buu, which is unlikely since Evil Buu is just an offshoot of Innocent Buu, or Good Buu regained the full powers of Innocent Buu upon being absorbed and later ejected by Kid Buu. I lean towards Good Buu regaining most of his powers here, since a being less than half as strong as Innocent Buu should be closer to Vegeta and getting treated about as badly as he did against Kid Buu. Good Buu's power was also treated as significant by Vegeta, and enough of a threat that it needed to be wiped out before he could get back to full health. All of this points to Good Buu being on level with Innocent Buu and solidly sitting at 8th place in the ranking. Standing at 7th place in the ranking, we have the South Supreme Kai. His strength is mostly speculative, but we do have 3 points that points to his power being significant. For one, he is considered the strongest among the Kais by Kibito Kai, which was disclosed in the same discussion that mentions the Grand Supreme Kai himself. While the South Kai is likely weaker than his superior's full, unweakened power, as of their battle with Kid Buu, he likely stood as their strongest asset. This places him above the Grand Supreme Kai, but what else does he have going for him? We don't have the anime to draw on, where he actually did pretty good against Kid Buu. Instead, we know that he definitely did fight against Kid Buu, but unlike the other Kais, he was absorbed by Buu, not outright killed. At best, this could mean that the Kai was actually winning in their fight. Given his ability to stand against Moro alongside a full-power Grand Supreme Kai, this might be the case, and he was absorbed by Buu because he couldn't find any other way to beat him. Or, South Kai's strength was just significant enough to challenge Kid Buu to the extent that Buu opted to absorb him instead of killing him outright. Originally, I leaned more towards this interpretation of his strength, as I wanted to be as conservative as possible when it came to scaling a character on just speculation alone. However, given the fact that Buff Buu was actually stronger than Super Buu, there exists a possibility that South Supreme Kai is actually an absolute monster. I say this because we know that a Super Saiyan 1 Gotenks is roughly equivalent to Super Saiyan 3 Goku, given Goku's ability to take out Fat Buu and his own confidence that Gotenks could do the same with only Super Saiyan. Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks is on level with Super Buu. This means Super Buu is multiple times stronger than Super Saiyan Gotenks and Super Saiyan Goku. For Kid Buu, with only the South Supreme Kai added onto his power to exceed Super Buu in power, South Supreme Kai would need to be at least 3 times stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku for Buff Buu to be even on par with Super Buu. While I don't think Toriyama had it in mind that the South Supreme Kai needed to be at least 3 times stronger than Goku for Buff Buu to be that strong, I do think the South Supreme Kai's ability to fight Moro alongside a prime Grand Supreme Kai, him forcing the insane Kid Buu to absorb him, overkilling him, and the boost that he gave to Kid Buu's strength, places his power in a legendary realm that exceeds Goku's own and more than justifies his ranking in C tier. I think one of the greatest indicators of the South Supreme Kai's power being a hidden benchmark in this arc is Kibito's own disrespect towards the mortals. He showed disrespect towards Gohan and Goku multiple times throughout the saga, only really coming around when Gohan fully unlocked his potential. Goku and Gohan both eclipsed Kibito and Shin many times over, if not in base, then certainly in their Super Saiyan forms, but it was Gohan reaching an absurd level of power far beyond even Goku's that finally humbled Kibito. If Kibito was comparing them to the speculated 3 times Goku's peak, South Supreme Kai, then it makes sense why he never truly respected the mortals until then. Just something to think about. While I have just gone over all of this at length, I do still think it's best to be conservative with the South Supreme Kai's ranking, so I'm keeping him below Kid Buu and Goku. A few spots above his good counterpart and landing at 6th place is Kid Buu. Before I go over what Kid Buu did, I need to first explain why he's not the #1 strongest Buu, because that's still a topic of debate in 2026. He is the most dangerous Buu, yes, but that's because he'll just blow up the planet he's standing on over bothering to fight the inhabitants most of the time. It completely skips the defend the Earth part of the defending the Earth because his opponent wouldn't even get the chance to stop him. This is also a manga-only ranking, so that guidebook statement regarding Kid Buu being the Buu with the greatest power holds no weight here, as it is directly tied to the anime. And while it is true that Kid Buu did steal a majority of the Grand Supreme Kai's power, it is evident that he did not actually have access to his divine ki. If Buu did, then that introduces a massive consistency issue as Good Buu, Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta are all capable of fighting and at least surviving against a being with enough power to restore Moro Arc Goku's power beyond his maximum to the point that he achieved a whole new level of Ultra Instinct. No, it's more likely that this is a situation where Buu might have been able to learn to access or harness this ki over time, but he was never actually aware of it. It's kind of similar to Gohan's situation where his hidden power is beyond everyone's, but he has to either get really angry to access it, train extensively, or go through a multi-hour long ritual with a god to fully gain access to it. Given enough time, maybe Kid Buu could have become the strongest Buu, but instead we see him fight evenly with Super Saiyan 3 Goku, fail to kill Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta, and get challenged by Good Buu. While him running this gauntlet is really impressive, especially with his insane stamina and healing factor on top of all of that, he cannot get any higher than C tier, and depending on how you feel about the next ranking, is locked at 6th place in this list. Sitting right above Kid Buu and at the top of C tier, we have Goku. I want to start Goku's ranking off with a disclaimer that this is Goku with his dead body, not the alive version of Goku that actually fought Kid Buu. His stamina is much better here, to the extent that he can seemingly maintain Super Saiyan 3 at maximum efficiency without too much strain on his body. A stark contrast to his living body, who can't maintain the form for long against Kid Buu and is forced to resort to the Spirit Bomb to finish him off. With his dead body, Goku had the clear upper hand over Fat Buu, dominating him in their fight when he had no intention of actually killing him. Goku later said that he could have killed Buu, but wanted to leave him for Goten and Trunks to ensure that the Earth's current population could take care of themselves, with this sentiment later being carried to its extreme, where Goku and Vegeta went for the Spirit Bomb against Buu instead of bringing Gohan or Gotenks in to kill him. Against Kid Buu, Goku thought that he'd be able to actually beat him if he had time to reach his maximum strength, but obviously couldn't due to the strain on his living body. Consequently, every feat from Goku on Kid Buu in this fight is from him at a level below his maximum power, since he appears to lose tons of it for every second that he remains in this form, to the extent that when he tried powering up to his max power again, he actually lost so much energy that he couldn't even maintain a transformation, and struggled to utilize a Spirit Bomb with the energies of some of the strongest characters in the series to its fullest potential, leading to a scenario where Buu almost won. We do know that Goku considers himself and Vegeta much weaker than Super Buu, to the extent that he thought their plan to save everybody absorbed by him was ultimately useless if they were the ones to fight him. This places a pretty clear ceiling on his power, firmly locking him out of the next highest tier and keeping Goku at the top of C tier. Sitting at the 4th strongest of the arc and the top of B tier, we have Gotenks. Just going to be honest for a second, this guy's the most annoying character to scale in the Buu Saga. Everyone else kind of makes sense, but Gotenks is just weird. I covered him a little in the various sections of this ranking leading up to this point, but just to go over it again, Gotenks before the Time Chamber is supposed to be able to beat Fat Buu. This places his Super Saiyan level of power on a similar tier to Super Saiyan 3 Goku's and Fat Buu's. That makes sense. Super Buu then comes along and Piccolo thinks that Super Saiyan Gotenks doesn't stand a chance against him. So he sends the boys into the Time Chamber to train for 15 days. They see some gains, and Piccolo suddenly believes that base Gotenks stands a semblance of a chance against Super Buu when his Fat Buu level Super Saiyan form didn't. This is proven to not be the case, but for Piccolo at all to think base Gotenks is relevant to his past Super Saiyan strength is very telling for his power, and would make even his base form viable for E or D tier. He then amps his base by 400 times upon going Super Saiyan 3, and at best has a slight advantage over Super Buu. That's enough to put Gotenks solidly above Goku, who was terrified of this version of Buu. But how much stronger is he than Goku? I know I previously said that Super Saiyan 1 Gotenks is roughly equivalent to Super Saiyan 3 Goku, but with Piccolo's comment about his growth in the time chamber, it's entirely possible that Super Saiyan 1 Gotenks is as much as 50 times stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. I think that's disgusting. I hate it so much. But even if base Gotenks is a portion of his former Super Saiyan strength, like a quarter, his full power is still massively stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. This is the problem with giving multipliers for transformations in a manga that isn't always the most concerned about rigid power scaling. You get wonky gaps like this. Still, assuming that Piccolo was actually just spouting complete nonsense and Gotenks barely grew in the time chamber, he is still at least 8 times stronger than Goku while in Super Saiyan 3 and is provably superior to him given his performance against Super Buu. As our only A tier, Gohan sits as the third strongest character of the arc and the strongest character that isn't a fusion or a composite of other characters. His scaling is pretty blatant as he completely stomped Super Buu in their brief fight. That's literally all that needs to be said for why he's above Gotenks, but I'll elaborate a little on some of the other aspects of his scaling. When Buu absorbs Gotenks and Piccolo, Gohan is definitely put at a severe disadvantage. The anime gives him a little more credit, but even in the manga, his ability to survive against Buutanks is really understated. For some reason, Buutanks seems to last the full 30 minutes of the fusion timer, not the 5 minutes that Gotenks is limited to when he goes Super Saiyan 3. Gohan lasts more than half that time against Buutanks before getting a heal from Dende, and survives the rest of the time to the point that Buutanks eventually detransformed into Piccolo after a brief intervention from Tien and Goku. Despite Gohan being beat up here, he still stands more than a chance against this weaker version of Buu, who is still a decent bit stronger than base Super Buu. While he had the third, second, and first worst fumbles of the arc, Gohan still stands as the third strongest character in the Buu Saga. Buuhan being S tier and the second strongest of the arc shouldn't surprise anyone. He's the sum of Super Buu, Gohan, Piccolo, Goten, and Trunks, eclipsing everyone else in this arc to an absurd degree. His strength is so significant that Vegito opted to immediately go to Super Saiyan in the manga, not bothering to even attempt to fight him in base. Whether or not that was due to his base being inferior to Buuhan is up to interpretation, but I think it at least speaks a little to Buuhan's power. That's all that really needs said. I'm just gonna move on to the next guy now. I actually lied during the beginning of this video. This isn't a ranking from F to S. This is actually a ranking from F to Z. And Vegito stands as the sole Z tier of the Buu Saga. His power is so immense that he completely dogged on Buuhan, the culmination of every other top fighter in the verse, in just Super Saiyan alone. Again, whether or not you think he could have done this in base is up to you, but it really doesn't change anything. Transmutation hacks doesn't work on this guy. If anything, his Jawbreaker form is the actual strongest character we see in this arc. I know that it's a common thing in Dragon Ball power scaling to say that hacks can be overcome with brute force. I'd argue that only his time abilities really fall under that category though, and that Vegito seems to just have the unique ability to maintain his sentience and faculties even after being transmutated. If this was a true case of Vegito overpowering Buu's Candy Beam, then he wouldn't have been transformed in the first place. He would have shrugged it off and continued beating on Buu. I don't know, just something I felt was worth including, even though that's more of a gag than something to be taken seriously. But yeah, Vegito's strong enough to beat on Buu as a Super Saiyan and resist his absorption with an energy shield. He could amp himself further by going Super Saiyan 2 or 3, but I don't know why he'd have to do that against anyone in this arc, when even his Super Saiyan form is more than enough to handle Buuhan. And that's it. I have the full tier list up now, so you can see how everything looks. As I said in the beginning, ranking the Buu Saga really was more difficult than all the other Dragon Ball arcs. That might be a consequence of what I see is this arc's messier execution and greater length compared to the past Dragon Ball arcs, but I think this ranking is one that I can put out without losing too much sleep over. If you have any comments, criticisms, or disagreements with my ranking, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. At the end of the day, power scaling is heavily subjective. Some things are set in stone, like Vegeta being stronger than Piccolo, or Vegito being stronger than everyone, but I'm sure my rankings didn't gel entirely with all of you. Even now I question some of my placements, like the South Supreme Kai's placement for example. Still, if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing for more power scaling videos. I also occasionally stream Nuzlocke runs, so if that's also something you'd be into, stop by a live sometime, or check out my playlist section for those VODs. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I'm probably not going to touch super scaling, more out of a desire for my own happiness than anything. But if there's demand for it, I'll do it. Naruto or Jujutsu Kaisen could be fun. I also just caught up on Kagurabachi and have some thoughts there. I don't know. If you're still watching at this point and have a series you want me to check out and rank, just let me know in the comments. Don't suggest One Piece. I'm not doing One Piece. You'd have to pay me to do that. But yeah, until next time.